Switzerland is the focus of railway journeys from all parts of Europe. And at the heart of Switzerland, the Bernese Oberland is the goal of many international travelers. The town of Interlaken, today a popular tourist center, has been a thoroughfare for those who journey for many centuries. It's located between the two lakes of Thun and Brienz, once a single sheet of water covering the length of the valley. The town stands on a delta, created by the gradual silting up of the mouth of the Luzern River, which is fed by the glaciers of the high mountain peaks of the Eiger, Monk and Jungfrau. Today the separated lakes are still connected by a river, which flows right through the center of the town, although the many low bridges mean that navigation between the two is no longer possible. There have been settlements in the region since earliest times, and an Augustinian monastery was founded here in 1130. It was the monks who named the region Interlaken, or between the lakes, the precursor of its present-day name. The old town of Unterseen, now part of Interlaken, still retains much of its charm and tranquility. Tourism became an important factor at the beginning of the 19th century, and visitors quickly fell under the spell of the mountains. Grand hotels sprang up to accommodate the many guests who flocked here from all corners of the world. Leisure travel to this area only became possible, however, as a result of the rapid development in rail, ship and road transport. Besides being a major holiday destination in its own right, Interlaken is the gateway to the major alpine passes of central Switzerland, and good communications have always been vital. The steamers on Lake Thun have been bringing visitors here since the early 19th century, before the arrival of the railways. Today, Interlaken West Station, next to the pier, welcomes standard gauge traffic from all parts of Europe, handled by the Swiss Federal Railways, commonly known as the SBB or CFF, and also by the Bern-Lötschberg Samplon Company, which operates buses and boats locally as well. Trains from the Furka Oberalp Company also run here, but only in the model railway exhibition building beside the station. O-gauge predominates, with a variety of different Swiss layouts under construction and in operation. These provide an enthralling experience for even the youngest enthusiast. The best layout, however, is to be found at Interlaken Ost, where a variety of stock is waiting to depart. Though this is not a model, it's the real station at the other end of the town. The terminus is actually owned by the Bernese Oberland Bahn, although the SBB and the BLS companies also have running rights. The station operates with both metre and standard gauge, and the wide assortment of locomotives and coaches make it a delight for train spotters. The brown and cream BOB narrow gauge trains travel from here along the beautiful Luzern Valley to Lauterbrunnen and Grindelwald, before making connections with the Wengenalp and Jungfrau railways for the journey to the top of Europe. Standard gauge trains depart daily from Interlaken, taking passengers to many international destinations. Interlaken is also the terminus for the Swiss Federal Railway's only meter gauge line, which runs from here to Luzern across the Bruenig Pass. The Bruenig Line was started by a private company, the Jura-Bern-Luzern Railway, which was taken over by the Jura-Simplonbahn only a couple of years later. They continued to run it until 1903, when they were taken over by the Swiss Federal Railway. The line, which was opened on the 14th of June 1888, uses a mixture of adhesion and rack, and in the early days separate locomotives were used for the various parts of the journey. The early adhesion locomotives were G33 and G34s and ran along the level sections at either end of the line. The original HG22 rack engines were underpowered and had all been replaced by the 1920s. Several of the HG33s, which superseded them, remained in use until the 1950s, and of the few which still survive, number 1067 is still in occasional service. In 1941, electrification took place, and 17 new locomotives were bought which were able to run along the entire length of the line. While these could work alone on the level sections, they normally ran double-headed on the rack. In 1954, two more powerful engines named Meiringen and Giswell were introduced, designed to work the steep gradients between the stations with those names. It wasn't until the 1980s that the need was felt for more up-to-date traction. 8 of these HGE-44 locomotives were brought into service and are the distinctive red engines which haul the Bruenig trains today. The first part of our journey along the Bruenig Line will take us from Interlaken along the northern shore of Lake Brienz as far as Meiringen. As we pull out of Interlaken station, our track immediately diverges from the BOB line, which branches off to the right towards Wilderswil. Our route climbs steeply up an embankment in order to gain enough height to cross the river, giving us a bird's-eye view of the crowded sidings below. The bridge over the River Aare is a graceful iron structure. At 165 meters, it's the longest on the whole line. It raises the track high above the river, allowing the lake steamers to pass underneath on their way into Lake Brienz. At Riggenberg, a 17th century church is set within the ruins of a castle some 400 years older. Lake Brienz lies encircled by the surrounding mountains, with villages dotted along both shores. It's 259 meters at its deepest point and lays claim to be Switzerland's cleanest lake. It's curious to note that while it's the smaller of the two lakes, Brienz is now some 7 meters higher than its neighbor. It's not only trains which stop at Oberried. Lake steamers also call here on their tour around the lake. Passenger boats have been providing excursions since the 1830s, and today 5 craft take visitors on scenic trips around the lakeside villages. All are owned by the Bern-Lötschberg Samplon Railway Company and are based on the river next to Interlaken Ost Station. Although none of the 19th century craft survive, some have passed their names on to later vessels, such as the motorboat Interlaken. The largest of the modern ships, Brienz, carries up to 1,000 passengers. She came into service in 1981, replacing an earlier steamship of the same name, seen here on an old film from the 1940s. The original boat was a paddle steamer driven by steam reciprocating engines. The vessel had only half the passenger capacity of today's Brienz. The pride of the lake, however, is the paddle steamer Lötschberg, dating from 1914 and still delighting visitors after more than 3/4 of a century of sterling service. Leaving Oberried, our route continues along the lake. The terrain here is very flat, and during the course of our journey to Meiringen, the track's height never varies by more than 30 meters. At Brienz, the railway plays a game of hide and seek, running through a deep cutting before entering the last of the 9 tunnels on this stretch of the line. This will take us almost 900 meters underneath the very center of the village. Motorboat Brienz is waiting at the quay next to the station to make a connection with our train, giving visitors the opportunity of a lake cruise. The picturesque village of Brienz, after which the lake is named, is spread along the shore. There's been a settlement here for centuries, and the village today still preserves many of its lovely old chalets. During the summer, the village becomes a riot of color, with containers of pelargoniums gracing every nook and cranny. The church, dating back over 1,000 years, had to be extensively rebuilt in 1883 following a fierce storm. The use of timber for building is evident throughout the village, and carvings are incorporated for both secular and sacred purposes. Indeed, the number of carvings found throughout the village highlights one of Brienz's claims to fame. The wood carving trade was established here at the beginning of the 19th century, and today's carving workshops fulfill the demand by visitors from all over the world for authentic Swiss craftsmanship. Brienz is also home to the Swiss Woodcarving School, training the carvers of the future. Students come from all over Switzerland to undertake the 4-year apprenticeship. The school is responsible for the colourful signs which ornament the village, pointing the visitor in the direction of the various attractions. Two of these signs convey clues to Brienz's other major attraction, for it's home of the Brienz-Rothorn Railway, now the only rack and pinion steam line left in Switzerland. During the summer months, trains travel from the lake shore high into the mountains almost 1,700 meters above the village. The railway opened in 1892, only a few years after the arrival here of the Bruenig Line, and the station situated just across the road from its mainline counterpart has changed little over the years. It was always designed as a tourist line, and in the early years it flourished. However, by 1914, passenger traffic had declined to such an extent that the line was closed, and stayed thus until 1931. 5 of the original steam locomotives which had been mothballed were recalled to duty, for the line had missed the electrification which swept across much of Switzerland in the 1920s. A 6th locomotive was purchased from SLM in 1933 to augment the fleet, with a further delivery in 1936, bringing the total complement to 7. In 1962, the original locomotive number 1 was replaced by a sister engine of the same vintage, formerly with the Roches-Denay rack railway. 4 diesel locomotives were introduced in the 1970s and 80s to assist with the heavy demand of passengers as the railway's popularity increased. To mark the centenary of the line, a new steam locomotive, number 12, was commissioned, and it was brought into service on the 17th of June, 1992, 100 years to the day of the opening of the line. The modern sheds, situated near Brienz station, are a paradise for the steam enthusiast. The old sheds, with their roundhouse layout and turntable, were replaced in the 1970s by a large modern complex, complete with a motorized traverser. Preparation begins early to make the locomotives ready for the duties of the day. While passengers queue to buy their tickets today, it's interesting to see that the line was just as popular half a century ago, when this early color film was made. As with all steam rack working, the locomotive must travel downhill of the carriages to act as a brake. The 800mm gauge line uses the ABD rack system to enable the trains to climb inclines which average 1 in 8. Trains leave in 2s and 3s, as there are only a few passing places along the entire 7.5-kilometre route. The track passes through 6 rock tunnels during the course of the journey, the most spectacular going right through the mountain face. Glimpses of the route can be seen from the track below. We've climbed 775 meters and are about halfway through our journey, having over 900 meters still to ascend. The middle station at Planalp provides the chance for locomotives to take on water. On each uphill journey, a locomotive can vaporize up to 2,000 liters, so stocks need to be replenished before continuing. The water here comes from the nearby stream and a local spring. On level ground, the locomotives appear to have taken a nosedive. They are built with their boilers tilted to keep the water and the driver level on the steep line. Despite the difficulties of the terrain and the lack of modern technology, the line was built between the summer of 1890 and the autumn of 1891, with no work possible during the intervening winter because of the hostile conditions. At this altitude, the weather can be unpredictable, and clouds appear from nowhere to wreathe the track in mist. station at Rothorn, perched like an eagle's nest on the very edge of the mountain, is a tribute to the skill of the railway builders and to the vision of the men who fought to have the line constructed. At the summit, the energetic can walk up to the monument marking the boundaries of 3 of Switzerland's cantons. And on a clear day, visitors are rewarded with a truly breathtaking panorama over the peaks which form the backbone of the Swiss Alps. We are now well over halfway along the route to Meiringen and almost at the head of the lake. Brienz was the start of the line to Luzern for the first 28 years of the railway's history, with passengers arriving from Interlaken by boat to begin their voyage. While some prefer to remain on the water, we continue our route along the lake shore. At Brienz station, a colourful map alerts the visitor to one of Switzerland's most interesting outdoor attractions. Ballenberg houses a wide variety of old buildings, which were under threat of destruction in their original locations. Since its opening in 1978, over 70 buildings have been dismantled and brought here from all parts of the country. Now lovingly restored and re-erected in regional groups, they grace a large forested park and provide a fascinating stroll back in time. Not only houses, but also old barns and outbuildings have been rescued, and traditional crops are grown to provide an authentic environment. There's something here for visitors of all ages, with the chance to try typical Swiss games and pastimes. Regional crafts, such as the spinning of flax, are practiced here in their authentic settings. This wheel was specially made by a fellow Ballenberg craftsman. After all the walking, there's the chance to rest weary feet at a restaurant, housed in a 19th century house from Canton Zoo. On the train again, we take the opportunity to sit back and enjoy the scenery as we continue along the Haasli Valley towards Meiringen. The Aare River, once prone to flooding the valley floor, has been contained in a canal since 1862 and runs in a dead straight line alongside the railway. On the outskirts of Meiringen, our track is joined by the route to Luzern, for the train makes a reversal at the station here. In the days of steam, the adhesion locomotive remained at Meiringen and was replaced by a dedicated rack engine. Although our modern locomotive is capable of running on both systems, another HGE 44 will take over for the rest of the journey, thus speeding the transition. At Meiringen, there's the chance to explore the Aare Valley by taking the little orange tram which runs as far as Innetkirchen. This vehicle replaced the older, blue battery-driven model, which is now to be found in the Luzern Transport Museum. However, for fans of Sherlock Holmes, The first stop near the Reichenbach Falls is a must. This is the scene of that famous detective's final confrontation with Moriarty. To reach the falls, we must first use the funicular, powered by electricity generated from the famous waterfall itself. Falls are formed where the streams of the Rosenlaue Valley cascade 100 meters down the side of the Aare Valley. Visitors throughout the ages have been impressed by their power and beauty. And it's not surprising that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, a frequent visitor to Switzerland, chose them as the dramatic backdrop for the alleged death of the sleuth of Baker Street. In Meiringen, you could be forgiven for thinking you'd return to London. However, this is Baker Street, Swiss style. The famous detective has made his mark on the village, and the name of Sherlock Holmes is ever present. A handsome bronze statue by the famous sculptor John Doubleday has been erected in a square, aptly renamed Conan Doyle Place. Holmes even has a museum dedicated to his memory, which was opened by the daughter of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle in 1991. Here, a faithful reconstruction of the front room of 221B Baker Street is to be found, just as if the famous detective and his good friend Dr. Watson had recently left to solve yet another case. The famous violin has been casually thrown down, while the latest issue of the Police News may give a clue as to the whereabouts of the enterprising pair. Meiringen values its connection with Sherlock Holmes so highly that he's even been made an honorary citizen of the community. From Meiringen station, we will continue our journey to Luzern in the second part of the Bruenig Line. This section of the line climbs steeply over the Bruenig Pass, and rack will assist the passage of our train. Once over the summit, we journey through the spectacular lake country of central Switzerland, through some of the loveliest scenery in Europe. We will make swift progress along our route, enjoying more unique views. Journey's end will be at the busy international terminus in Luzern. We'll explore more of the history of this line and take a closer look at the old HG33 rack locomotives. Loco 1068 is a static exhibit at Meiringen, but we will see unique archive footage of her making a special outing to mark the 75th anniversary of the line. We'll also see Loco 1067 in steam today on a special enthusiasts run. There'll be time to visit attractions along the route, including the cantonal capital of Sarnen, with its historic open-air parliament and impressive Baroque churches. At Luzern, we'll visit the picturesque Old Town, with its famous painted bridges over the River Reuss, and the heartbreaking Dying Lion, carved in memory of the Swiss soldiers who were slaughtered during the French Revolution. For transport enthusiasts, the Swiss National Museum is an attraction not to be missed, and we'll visit the railway section of this fascinating collection. So travel with us again for the remainder of this journey through the heart of Switzerland along the Bruenig Line.